Masechet Menaḥot Daf Memtet Taneh Rabba Bar Bar Chana Kameh Derav Kibsei Aseret Sheshechatan Leshum Elim Kesherim Velo Alula Be'alim Leshum Chova. Rabba Bar Chana recited a baraita in front of Rav, and that taught that if you have the kibsei aseret, a keves is a sheep that is in its first year, which is it's supposed to be for the kibsei aseret, the ones that are closely associated with the two breads. And when the Kohen did shechita, he had in mind it would be an ayil. An ayil is a ram, which is a sheep, but it's in its second year. So he has in mind the wrong category or the wrong age of the animal. Nevertheless, that korban is kosher. It's a valid korban. However, it will not fulfill the obligation of its owner. The owner in this case is the community. These are communal offerings of the shtei halechem together with the kibsei aseret. So the kibsei aseret obligation for the community has not been fulfilled, even though one can continue and sprinkle and do the rest of the service for that of that animal. So the problem here is that he didn't have in mind the correct animal type. He had in mind an ayil when actually it is supposed to be a keves, and it is in fact a keves. You see that the mistake goes deep because on Shavuot, in addition to the Shnei Kevasim, one also actually does bring two Elim Shenayim. And so by having in mind, doing this Shechita, having in mind that this is an Ayil. So this, doing that, then crosses over into the category of the Elim, which is an Olah. And so that's the essence of the problem here. And therefore, since it's you have in mind a different age of animal, it does not fulfill the one that's supposed to, the kibsei aseret, which you have to know what you're doing, and you have to know that this is a keves and not think that it's an ayil. That's the baraita. Now, Rabba Bar Chana said this baraita to Rav, but Rav disagreed with it. Amar le Rav, alu ve'alu. It's okay. It fulfills the obligation. This is not the same as if you're doing this keves as a shilam. It's supposed to be a shilamim, shalmei aseret, and you have in mind, I'm going to do this as an olah. There, if you're doing it shelo lishmo, we've discussed that in the past, shelo lishmo will not fulfill the obligation. Here, you're not having in mind a different type of korban, and so therefore it's not the same problem as above. You just had in mind you thought it was an ayil instead of a keves. Okay, fine, but you still had in mind the proper type of korban, and therefore Rav says it fulfills the obligation. Amar Rav Chisda, mistabera milete derav bechsavur elim ushchatan leshum kebasim, shere kebasim leshum kebasim nishchatu. Rav Chisda has a qualification or explanation of Rav, and he says the words of Rav make sense if the Kohen who's doing the shechita thinks that it's an ayil. By mistake. It is in fact a keves. But he looks at it, as sometimes it's hard to tell, 1 year old or 2 years old, and he thinks it's an ayil, but nevertheless he has in mind, I'm doing shechita on this as a keves. So that, in that case, yes, Rav makes sense, because it is a keves, it's supposed to be a keves, and he has in mind it's a keves. Even though in his own mind, he actually thinks it's an ayil, and then he wrongly says, I'm doing it as a keves, even though he knows it's an ayil. So in his mind, he thinks he's doing something wrong, but in reality, it's called correct. And therefore, it makes sense that Rav would say in that case, that it fulfills the obligation. El aval kesavur elim ushchatan leshum elim lo akira betaut havya akira. However, according to Rav Chisda, if he thinks that it's an ayil and he has the shechita with having intent, it's an ayil. So now in his own mind, he thinks he's doing the right thing. It's just a total mistake because it is in fact a keves. In that case, what Rav said does not make sense, and it should not be a valid offering because he is uprooting the korban by thinking it's an ayil and doing it that for the sake of an ayil. He's saying and not as a keves, and since you're doing it not as a keves, so then you're uprooting the definition of this korban, and it cannot fulfill the obligation of kibsei aseret. And even though it's a mistake because he thinks he's doing the right thing, nevertheless, Rav Chista's principle is that if you uproot something, even if it's by mistake, you end up uprooting it and it's not a valid korban. So Rav Chista agrees with Rav in only one case, but not another case. Rabba Amar, akira betaut lahavya akira. Rabba says that if you uproot something, but it's by mistake, then that's not called uprooting. You didn't know, you thought you were doing the right thing, but it ends up being a mistake, then that's not called uprooting. And therefore, in this case, when he thought it was an ayil, he genuinely thought it was an ayil, and he did it for the sake of an ayil, that is not called uprooting it because he actually thought it was an ayil. He certainly wasn't intending to say it's not uprooting it from its definition as a keves. And therefore, according to Rabbah, he would say that Rabbah's interpretation of Rav is that Rav would say across the board that in both of these cases, Rav would say it fulfills the obligation of the owner. Good. Now we're going to challenge Rabbah. In fact, Rabbah himself is going to challenge himself. Here we have Rabbah. Some versions have Rabbah. Umot binan ashmatin. It makes sense it should be Rabbah because he says we're going to bring a challenge against our own tradition. So Rabbah at first said that akira beta'ut lahavya akira, that since it's a mistake, that you have the wrong item in mind, but it's by mistake, so it's not going to uproot it, and therefore it can still fulfill the obligation. But Rabbah brings a challenge to that thing that he just said from a Mishnah Masechet Gitin that teaches Hakohanim shepigilu b'Mikdash mezidin chayavin hashogigin peturin. If a kohen has a pigul intention, someone brings a korban. Here, can you do this for me? Yeah, sure. And the kohen has in mind that he's going to consume while he's doing shechita or zedikah. He has in mind he's going to consume it past the time. Now it becomes pigul. It's no good. Totally invalid. Now, does he have to pay the owner who brought it for him? Because the owner is going to have to bring another one. If the Kohen did it on purpose, he knew that this was wrong, and on purpose he did this error, then yes, he has to pay damages for the guy who brought it, and now he's going to have to bring another one. But if the Kohen did it by mistake, it was an honest mistake, then the Kohen does not have to pay. Too bad for the guy. He could pick a more conscientious Kohen, but he did it by mistake, so he doesn't have to pay. V'tane ala pigula and pigul. We have a teaching, a braita about this Mishnah that says even if it's shogeg, the pigul is pigul. In other words, the korban is still invalid, even if he did it by mistake. His intention was wrong, but totally by mistake. It was he didn't realize. So he doesn't have to pay, but the offering is still pigul. Hechidame. Now, what case is this Mishnah talking about? If let's say the person is bringing a korban chatat, bring this korban chatat for me, and the Kohen knows it's korban chatat, and nevertheless he has in mind while doing shechita, I'm going to do shechita for having in mind that I'm going to eat this from this korban chatat like a shelamim for a day, a night, and a day. Really, a chatat should be just a day and a night. And he has in mind as a shelamim. And he knows that he's doing that. So would you call that shogeg? No, that would be mezid. We want to know, what's the case of shogeg where you say he doesn't have to pay, but it's still pigul? So that would be a case of mezid because he knows that the right thing. And he has the wrong intention anyway. No, it must be that it is in fact supposed to be a chatat. The guy brings it as a chatat. The Kohen, by mistake, thinks that it's a shelamim, and so he has intention also for shelamim when he does the activities. Vekatane pigulan pigul alma akira betaut avya akira. And nevertheless, the Braita taught that it is pigul. So we see that uprooting something, even though he made a mistake, nevertheless it uproots it and it's pigul. It's completely invalid. So this Mishnah teach and Baraita together teach that akira beta'ut havya akira. However, Rabba before said akira beta'ut la havya akira. So how could we answer this? Amar le'Abaye, le'olam di'ada de'hatati v'kam mechashe ba l'shum shelamim u'bomer mutar. Abaye says no. The case could be where he knows it is a korban chatat. It's not where he thinks it's a shelamim. He knows that it is in fact a chatat. However, he thinks that it's permitted to have in mind for a chatat that you'll eat it for a day, a night, and a day. He forgot the halacha, and he thinks that killing this chatat, doing shechita, the sprinkling, having in mind that he can eat it like a shelamim for a day and a night and a day, he thinks that's permitted. So that's an error. That's the case that is talking about, where it says, even though he's in error, it is pigul. But that is an error in the law. However, it nevertheless will be pigul. However, according to Rabbah, if it was an error in what the item is, because he thinks it's actually a shelamim, and he has in mind for a shelamim, then you know what? In fact, his pigul thought would be not an uproot. It would not uproot it. It would not uproot it from what it is chatat, because he has in mind something completely different. So therefore, since he thinks it's a shelamim, and so he's doing it as a shelamim, it's just a mistake. And so we ignore his mistake. He's not trying to uproot it, and therefore, according to Rabbah, if that was the case, in fact, it would not be pigul. So we answer the question. Matib Rabbi Zera. Another challenge against Rabbah from Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Shimon Omer. A Braita teaches that according to Rabbi Shimon, Kol Menaḥot shenikmesu shelo lishman kesherot, ve'alula be'alim l'shum choba. Any korban mincha, even though the Kohen comes and does kemitzah, having in mind a different type of korban mincha. There's all various types of korban mincha. Nevertheless, it's okay. And it even fulfills the obligation of the owner. Why? שאין המנחות דומות לזבחים שהקומץ מחבת לשום מלחשת מעשה המוכיחין עליה שהיא מחבת. Because korban mincha is not the same as korban as an animal sacrifice. If you have idu kemitzah from a pan, and you say, I'm doing this kemitzah from a shallow pan, and you say, I have in mind what do kemitzah, this is for a deep pan. Wait a second. Yeah, it's clear. Anybody can see that it's from a deep pan. And so therefore, the action speaks louder than the thoughts that he has. And so we ignore his false thoughts because the action, you just look at it and you see that it's clear that it's supposed to be a machabat. Or, chareba l'shum belula, ma'aseh mochichim aleha shehi chareba. If it's supposed to be dry without oil, and he says, I'm doing kemitzah as a korban mincha that has oil. Okay, but everybody can see it doesn't have oil. Therefore, your false intentions are ignored because the action we can see speaks louder. That's not true with zevachim, because with a zevach, you bring a certain type of animal. That type of animal could be an olah, could be a shelamim, it could be lots of things. And so just doing shechita, sprinkling blood, just looking at it, you couldn't tell if he's bringing if this is a olah or shelamim or hatat. Many animals are ambiguous. They could be used for many different things. And therefore, for a zeva, for animal sacrifice, if you have the wrong intention, it's no good. But for korban mincha, that's okay. We learned this earlier in the Masechet. Ava bezebachim enoken, shechita achad dekolan, kabbalah achad dekolan, zirika achad dekolan. For animal sacrifices, shechita looks the same for all of them. Kabbalah, the receiving the blood, looks the same for all of them. And the zirika doesn't look exactly the same. There are differences. Some are one, some are two that are four, some are four. Okay, but nevertheless, there's a lot of commonality and ambiguity that you wouldn't be able to tell one from the other. Okay, that's what Rabbi Shimon's opinion was. Now we ask, what is the case exactly? Does he know that it's supposed to be a mahabat type of korban mincha? And in any case he says, I'm doing it for the sake of marcheshet. Just because the action is clear, so what? He, by by purposely having the wrong intention is uprooting the type of korban. He's saying this is not going to be. It's supposed to be a machabat, and he's saying it's not a machabat. I'm only making it as a marcheshet. So even though the action is clear, but his intention will uproot it, so it should be no good. So that can't be the case. Rather, must be it's an honest mistake. He actually thinks it's a marcheshet. He's not looking, he's not paying attention. He just thinks it's a marcheshet. So he has in mind also as marcheshet. Maybe he's doing marcheshet offerings all day, so he figures just another one. And he's not looking to see it's really a machavat. So that means in this case, the action speaks louder than the words, because it was a total mistake. And anyone who's looking, if you point it out to him, he says, oh yeah, I made a mistake. That shows that only in this case where he was just an error, he didn't realize, that's when we say the action speaks louder than words. But in all other cases where you don't have an action, well then, if he uproots it by mistake, then it is uprooted. The only thing that saves him here is the fact that there's a pot there, right there. It's clear what it's supposed to be, and so we can see how it was prepared. But if not that the action was there, then even though it's a mistake, it would uproot it. Challenge against Rabbah, who said, Akira beta'ut lahavya akira, but this shows that Akira beta'ut is Akira. Amar le'Abaye, le'olam di'ada de'machabati, v'ka kamitzla l'shum marcheshet. Abaye says, no. This whole case of Rabbi Shimon could in fact be talking about where he knows it's a machabat. He knows what it's supposed to be, and he does it as a marcheshet, even though he knows that's supposed to be a machabat, and he does the wrong thing knowingly. And that which you asked, so what if the action is clear, but he's uprooting it by doing the wrong thing knowingly? Isn't he uprooting it? That was our question. That's why we rejected that interpretation. No, but that's not necessarily so. Rava leta'amed amar Rava, machshava de la minkera pesal rachamana. Machshava de minkera lo pesal rachamana. Rava follows his own opinion because he says that if you have intention where it's not clear, it's not recognizably false, if your intention is not recognizably false, then that will disqualify the korban. But if you have intention that's recognizably false, he is coming and saying, this is a marcheshet, but everybody looking sees that it's a mahavat. So your intention is clearly false. Since your intention is clearly false, it does not uproot the korban, and it will not become the korban will not become pasul. Therefore, the case of Rabbi Shimon is not where he made a mistake. In fact, he knows what he's doing, and he's making the error on purpose. And even though he's making the error on purpose, nevertheless, because it's clear what it is, so his error, even on purpose in machshava, we ignore that, and it's still valid. This case is not talking about akira betaut, and so therefore there's no challenge from here against Rabbah. Next Mishnah, התמידים אין מעכבין את המוספין, ולא המוספין מעכבין את התמידים. If you cannot bring a korban tamid, let's say on a Shabbat, you don't have enough animals, you can still bring a korban musaf of the Shabbat or holiday. And if you do not bring the korban musaf, that does not prevent you from bringing the korban tamid in the morning and in the afternoon. They are independent from each other. ולא המוספין מעכבין זה את זה. And furthermore, let's say it's Rosh Chodesh and Shabbat on the same day, and you only have enough animals, or for whatever reason you can only bring Shabbat. So you bring Shabbat, and even though you cannot bring the one for Rosh Chodesh or the other way around. If for whatever reason they were not able to bring the korban tamid in the morning, maybe they didn't have one, or it could be that there was a distraction, maybe a threat of an enemy came or something, and they weren't able to do it, they can still bring the korban tamid in the afternoon. Just because they didn't bring it in the morning doesn't mean that they lost the afternoon also. Amar Rabbi Shimon, so that was Tanakama, but Rabbi Shimon qualifies that. Ematai, bizman shayu anusim o shogegim, אבל אם היו מזידין ולא יקריבו kebes baboker, lo yakribu ben ha'arba'im. Rabbi Shimon says, when is that true that if you didn't bring it in the morning, you could still bring it in the afternoon, that's when it was something beyond their circumstance beyond their control, like an enemy came and distracted them, or it was a mistake, whatever, they miscommunication of some kind, and they made a mistake, then they can still bring it in the afternoon. But if they did on purpose, they're all there and they said, just lazy, we don't feel like bringing one today, we're not going to bring a Korban Tamid in the morning, then they can no longer bring it in the afternoon. Lo hiktiru ketor baboker yaktiru ben harbaim. Back to Tanakama, you have to bring the ketoret every morning and afternoon, and usually you bring you take the full amount and you bring half a measurement in the morning and half a measurement in the afternoon. If they did not bring it in the morning, they still bring it in the afternoon. Rabbi Shimon v'chulai yehekireba ben ha'arbaim she'en menachanechin et mizbach hazahab ela biktoret hasamim. And Rabbi Shimon, if in a case like that where you didn't bring it in the morning, don't only bring half a measurement in the afternoon, bring the full measurement in the afternoon. And he proves this because if you have a new Mizbach HaZahab, that would be the first Mizbach HaZahab, but anytime, eventually it wears out and you have to bring a new one. So when do you start using it? You don't start off in the morning, but rather in the afternoon. That should be the beginning, the first time that you use it. And when you use it in the afternoon, you're going to bring a full measurement. And so therefore, that's his proof that if you didn't do it in the morning, then you should bring the full measurement in the afternoon. And now we mention other items that if you're inaugurating a new piece of furniture, a new mizbeach, the outside mizbeach for the animals, that if you're starting it off, don't start it off in the afternoon, start it off in the morning, tamid shel shachar. And if you have a new shulchan, then start using it on Shabbat, and then because that's when you bring the new loaves and you put them on. So when you take off the old loaves, take out the old shulchan that you're not going to use anymore, and introduce the new shulchan on Shabbat. If you have a new menorah to inaugurate, then you inaugurate it by lighting the 7 lamps in the afternoon. Gemara, Sibur שאין להם תמידין ומוספין. איזה מהן קודם? רבי חייא בר רבין אס רב חיסדא. If the community does not have enough animals for Korban Tamid and for the Musafin, let's say Shabbat, and there's not enough animals for both, you have to choose. Which one takes precedence? Hechidame. We ask about that question. What's the case exactly? Ilema timidin diome umsafin diome peshita. Timidin adife davu lehu tadir umekudash. If you're talking about the Korban Tamid and the Korban Musaf of that day, and on Shabbat, it's in the morning, and we only have a couple of animals, not enough for everything, so then obviously the Korban Tamid is going to take precedence because the Korban Tamid has the benefit of being Tadir, and anytime you have Tadir, Sheno Tadir, Tadir Kodem. Now there is the counter, you could say, is that the Musaf is holy because it's for Shabbat, but the Korban Tamid on Shabbat also has the holiness of Shabbat, and therefore the Korban Tamid is Tadir, because you bring it every day. It's also holy, and therefore that certainly will take precedence over the Musaf, which is only holy, but not as regularly brought as the daily offering. Okay, so that's a simple case. We don't need to ask that case. Ela timidin dilmachar musafin dehaidana. Timidin adife sheken tadir, or dilma musafin adifa dehavulehu mekudash. Rather, the question must be about we're on Shabbat, and we have enough. We have 2 Korban Tamids for today. Okay, so that is good because we know that's going to take precedence. In addition, we have 2 more animals, and the question is: should we use those 2 animals for the Korban Musaf of Shabbat, or should we leave them for tomorrow because we're not getting any new animals tomorrow, and use it for the Korban Tamid of Sunday? That's the question. And the 2 sides are: we could say that we should leave it till Sunday because that's a Korban Tamid, and Korban Tamid, since it's a regular offering, takes precedence. Or should we say Musaf, because Musaf on Shabbat is holy, the Korban Tamid, which is going to be on Sunday, the next days, does not have that holiness of being on Shabbat, and so it doesn't have the same level of Kedusha. So that is the question that he asked. Amar le tini tuha. Rav Chisda says, we can learn it from our Mishnah. Ha-temidin en makibin et ha-musafin. Velo musafin makibin et ha-temidin. Velo musafin makibin ze et ze. Our Mishnah taught that if you don't have a Korban Tamid, you can still bring Korban Musaf. If you don't have a Korban Musaf, you can bring Korban Tamid. And if you don't have one kind of Musaf, you can still bring the other kind. Hechidami. What is the case of the Mishnah? Ilema de'itle ulakadem. Is it talking about a case where you have sufficient animals for everything, and the question is, what should you do first, the Korban Tamid or the Korban Musaf? Is that what it's asking? Is that what the Mishnah is addressing? But that can't be. V'hatanya minayin shelo yeh davar kodem letamid shel shachar tamud omar ve'arach aleha kohen ve'amar rava ha'ola ola hadishona. There's a braita that says, how do you know that no other Korban should precede the Korban Tamid? The first thing you do in the morning, the first Korban that you offer, is the Korban Tamid. How do you know? Because it says, Varach aleha, where they will arrange upon it on the Mizbeach, ha'olah. The beginning of the Pasuk is that you bring the wood, you kindle the wood every morning, and then you put the olah on it. What do you mean, the olah? Which olah? Rava says, since it has a hey yedi'ah, the olah means the Korban Tamid, that should be the first one, olah rishona. Good. So that's how we know that the Korban Tamid is always going to be the first, and that therefore our Mishnah is not teaching us which one goes first. We know that already, that the Korban Tamid goes first. Ela peshita deretle. Rather, the Mishnah must be addressing a case where you do not have enough animals. V'ideo me'amai tadim kodash tadir adif. And if it's talking about the question, should I only have 2 animals on Shabbat? Should I use them for Korban Tamid, or should I use them for Korban Musaf of that day of Shabbat? Well, then that's obvious, because the Korban Tadir both is more frequent and also is holy because it's on Shabbat. So the Mishnah wouldn't have to teach us anything like that. Rather, the Mishnah must be talking about our case, the one that we were asking about. Where you have, it's on Shabbat. We have 2 animals for the Korban Tamid. That, for sure, we're going to use it for Korban Tamid. We have 2 more animals. We could use it today on Shabbat for a Musaf, or wait and use it till tomorrow. And for Korban Tamid on Sunday. And the Mishnah says, one does not prevent you from doing the other. Meaning that either way is good. You can choose this way or that way. Mikdash on Musaf on Shabbat, that's good. Or you can leave it till Sunday, because that's Tamid. And so one will not prevent you from doing the other. You can choose whichever one you want. That's the answer. Amar le Abaye. But Abaye has told Rav Chisda about that. Leolam di'it lehu ul kadem. Now, you don't have to explain the Mishnah as you did. We've explained the Mishnah. It has to be talking about this particular case. But you can explain the Mishnah more simply. That's talking about where he has enough animals. And it's talking about which one to do first. And that which you asked about it from the Braita said nothing should come before the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar. So for sure that's first. No, that Mishnah, that Braita is only talking about Lecha Techila, to do the mitzvah in the best way, do the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar first, and then the Musafim after. But that is only Lecha Techila, to do it the best way. But if, let's say, you wanted to do it, you had to, for some reason, to do the Musaf first, you could do it first. And that's what the Mishnah is talking about. They're saying that just because you didn't do the Tamid yet, it doesn't prevent you from doing the Musaf first. And just because you didn't do the Musaf yet, doesn't prevent you from doing the Tamid first. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. And therefore, this Mishnah, in fact, it cannot be used to answer our question. All right, so let's try another source to answer the question that Rabbi Chia bar Rabin asked. And this is from a Mishnah Masechet Arachin, Tashema. אין פוחתין משישה תלאים המבוקרים בלשכת התלאים כדי לשבת ולשני ימים טובים של ראש השנה. There was a chamber in the Bet HaMikdash called the Chamber of Lambs. Here's a picture of it. And they kept some lambs, inspected lambs in there. They kept at least 6 lambs in this chamber. Why 6? Because that's the most that you would need for the Korban Tamid for 3 days of Shabbat and holiday in a row. Even in the Bet HaMikdash, you could have a 3-day holiday. You have Shabbat and if Rosh Hashanah comes right after that. Now, Rosh Hashanah, even in the Bet Mikdash, if the witnesses come very late, then we're going to have to make, then they would make Rosh Hashanah also 2 days. Now, on Shabbat and Rosh Hashanah, it's going to be difficult to go get Korban Tamids, because you're going to have to go bring them from outside the Techum and so on. So therefore, you should always have 6 sheep that are checked and ready to go for the Korban Tamid of those 6 days. All right, that's what the Mishnah taught. Now let's analyze. What's the case? If it's a case where he has enough animals for everything that he needs to do, wait a second. You're going to count up all the animals that you have to bring for Shabbat and for Rosh Hashanah. You have a lot of animals, because you need the Musafim of Shabbat and Musaf of Rosh Hashanah and also Rosh Chodesh. So you bring also the Musafim of Rosh Chodesh on both days. If you count it up, you get to 22 animals. So if you have enough, then you should say, keep 22 animals in there. So it doesn't say that. So it must be it must be a case where they don't have enough animals, and it's teaching us, listen, you don't have enough animals? Here's what you should do. Keep 6 at least to use for the Korban Tamid for each of the 3 days. Ushma mina temidin adifeh. What do we see from that? That already on Friday, before Shabbat starts, you're going to get these 6 animals. And so this is all we have. We don't have enough for everything. Okay, so on Shabbat, you're going to certainly use 2 of them for Korban Tamid. And then you're going to say, well, now what should we do with the other 4? Should we use 2 for the Musaf on Shabbat? No, you see, this Mishnah says that when you have a limited number of animals, if you only have 6 for a 3-day holiday, then use them 2 for each day, only for Korban Tamid. So you see, we can prove from here the answer that better to save, if you have only a limited number of animals, better to save the animals for the Korban Tamid of tomorrow rather than the Korban Musaf of today. So isn't that a good proof? And we say no, not necessarily. Lo le'olam de'ite. Could be that they have plenty of animals. B'hachi ka'amar, en pochatin mishishat telema mebukarin b'lishchat ha'telaim, 4 yamim kodem shechita, umaneh ben bag hi. It's saying that one should not have less than 6 sheep that are checked in Lishkat HaTelaim, and they have to be checked from every day from 4 days before Shechita. So all year round, there's a special law, as we're about to see, according to Ben Bagbag, that the Korban Tamid, it doesn't apply to every type of Korban, but Korban Tamid, you have to check it for 4 days in a row to make sure that there's no blemishes, no blemish comes up, maybe something you didn't see the day before, something that came up that day. So that's why you need 6 of them, because every day you'll bring 2 more, and you'll recheck the one from the day that you brought the day before and the one that you brought the day before, so that you always have pre-checked animals for Korban Tamid. And where do we say that Ben Bagbag requires that? The Tanya, Ben Bagbag Omer. Minayin letamid sheton bikor 4 yamim kodem shechita. How do you know that? For Korban Tamid only, it has to be checked from 4 days before. Talmud lomar tishmeru lakli b'memoado. Ulanu omer v'aya lechem lemishmeret ad 14 yom. Because Pasuk says that you should observe this to do in Mo'ado, at its time. That's talking about Korban Tamid. And then it says regarding Korban Pesach that you're going to take it on the 10th and you're going to save it there and keep it there until the 14th. That's 4 days. So you see, actually, there's 2 Korbanot that require this. Korban Pesach, you have to already get from the 10th, and you have to check it on the 10th, and that's to be checked from 4 days before. And so we learn, Ma lehalan ta'un bikur 4 yamim kodem shechita, afkan ta'un bikur 4 yamim kodem shechita. So we learn that just like for Korban Pesach, you have to check it 4 days before and keep it safe and keep checking it. So too, the Korban Tamid, you have to bring it 4 days before and check it back then, and you keep it safe all of those days. So we see this is a special law for Korban Tamid. That's why in the special Chamber of the Lambs, we keep these 6, so that because these are designated for Korban Tamid. That's why you have 6. What about the other ones? Yeah, they have other animals. They're outside somewhere. They'll bring on that day. They'll bring an animal. They'll find one. They'll check it. It's okay. If not, they'll get another one, and they'll bring whatever they need to. So this is not talking about a case where they have limited number of animals at all, and therefore there is no proof from this Mishnah to answer our question. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.